Hi guys, and welcome back to Mentor and yet another video podcast. I hope you're all doing great. I am on a couple of weeks of vacation at the moment here in northern Sweden, and which means that I won't be doing as many podcasts as you used to. There might be this one and maybe another one coming up in the next couple of weeks, but I'll do my best to keep answering your questions that you're sending in. So, lately I have been receiving quite a few questions about fatigue management, flight time limitations, how do you keep yourself from getting too tired while you're working, and things associated with that. So that's what today is going to be about. So make sure that you, as always, stay tuned at the end, and if you like what you're seeing, then subscribe. I will need you guys to subscribe. The more subscribers I get, the more questions I tend to receive, the more content I have that I can base these podcasts on. So if you like this, subscribe. So if we start by talking about fatigue, as what is fatigue? Okay, there's a difference between just feeling a little bit tired and being fatigued. Fatigue is something that you can generally control more or less yourself. Okay, it will be influenced on things like your roster pattern, what type of operation you're doing. So if you're doing long haul flights or short haul flights, for example, and also if you're flying a lot of night, that would have an impact on how you're feeling fatigued or not. But also things that you can control yourself, which is, for example, how well do you rest when you're at home? Can you get a nice quiet place to sleep in? Do you have a young family with loads of kids, for example? That will have an impact. And also, of course, your personal fitness level. So it's really, really important in this job, as with any other job, really, to make sure that you keep exercising regularly, that you eat reasonably well, and that you keep your general kind of background stress level at a normal or low level. Because if you do have things that does impact on your stress level, things like, death in the family, maybe a breakup with your partner, or just moving house, really, it's going to have an impact on your fatigue, on your stress level, and then in the continuation, your fatigue. Okay, so you do have to have quite a lot of check on this. Like, you have to ask yourself, how am I feeling? Do I feel stressed? Is there something in my life that's going on? And we as pilots have a fairly big responsibility to make sure that we're fit, because whatever airline you're working for, whatever operations manual you're working under, it will always say that you're not allowed to operate if you feel that you are unduly influenced by fatigue. Okay, there is a responsibility of the airline to make sure that the roster patterns are good and that they allow enough time for proper rest. But then there's a lot of responsibility on the individual pilot as well, to make sure that you're not going out partying the day before you're flying, making sure that you get proper rest and so on, like I've been saying. So make sure that you do actively try to get the rest that you need prior to operating for before you start your working period. So there are a thing called flight time limitations, which is normally a chapter in your operations manual. I'm going to give you a little bit of examples out of the European flight time limitations that I am working under. They might be slightly different in different parts of the world. And as always, this podcast that I'm doing is just giving you an insight into how it can look, in order for you to actually calculate your flight time and limitations. You have to go into your own operations manual. So this is for entertainment and information purpose only. It's not for educational purposes. Okay, make sure that you use your own operations manual. So in my airline, for example, we have a fixed roster pattern. This is something I'm getting a lot of questions about. So in my airline, you tend to be, in the normal pilot roster will be that you're working 5 days of, for example, early sessions. So you start at around 6 in the morning and you finish around 4 in the afternoon on the long days. So you work 5 days of that. In those days, you can have something called standby. Standby is essentially a reserve duty, as in you have to be able to come in and fly in case one of your colleagues would call on sick, or in case there would be some operational need for you. But if the airline doesn't need you, they won't call you, which means that you can potter around the house at home and do things that you would be doing normally. You can be working out at home, or you can be doing your taxes or cleaning the house or whatever you feel like doing, really. But you have to be available normally within 1 hour to turn up in the airport for duty. So you have to make sure that you are rested properly before your standby duty. Of course, no consumption of alcohol during your standby duty. Basically, you have to treat your standby duty as if you were going to fly, and then you might not have to, and it might be kind of like an off day. But I've been getting questions about how often you get called off on standby, and it's impossible to answer. It depends on how many pilots are available at the base. It depends on what kind of, if it's a flu season going on, so there's a lot of people calling in sick, then it's highly likely that you're going to fly. If you're in a huge base and there's a lot of people, there might only be a couple of standbys, it's also very likely that you're going to fly. But so it's impossible to say how likely it is. You can always count on flying, and then if you don't fly and you have an extra off day, you can watch that, look at that as a bonus. Okay. So you've been working 5 days, possibly one standby or something during those 5 days, and then after that we have 4 days off. So that means your off days, it's completely up to you. You can do whatever you want on those. It is a possibility the company might call you and ask you if you're willing to fly, but generally it's up to you if you want to turn that down or if you want to fly in that case. But generally those 4 days are just like the weekends for normal people. It's off days, you do whatever you want. And then after those 4 days, you have another 5 days of working, in this case on late. So you shift generally from an early session to an off session, to a late session, to an off session, and then continue in early. So it keeps rolling like that. Now, that type of roster pattern has been scientifically proven to be very good when it comes to dealing with fatigue, because you have a long block of off days in between. So even though you're moving from early to late, so you have to shift your body clock a little bit, you still have enough time, if you treat it well, to rest properly and kind of reset your body clock, stay up a little bit longer so that you can, you won't be tired as early in the evening when you go into your late session, and so on. So it's scientifically proven to be very, very effective, and I have personally never had a problem with the roster pattern with causing fatigue. Now, that's the roster pattern, and this is different between different airlines. If you're working long haul, I have personally not flown long haul myself, so I can't really speak about that. I can only give you the feedback that I had from my friends that are flying long haul, and they say that long haul is tiring in a different way, while short haul flying tends to be tiring as in it's very intensive. You're flying 4 sectors a day, there's a lot of takeoffs and landings, there's a lot of descents, there's a lot of turnarounds, so it's more tiring because you're actually working all the time. Long haul is different because it's more low-key work for a longer period. You'll be sitting over the Atlantic for 8 hours, 9 hours or something, and then you have a really busy period at the end of your flight duty, and then you have to adapt possibly to the new time zone you're getting to, or not, which means that you might be up while everyone else is sleeping, and then you're returning, or you're doing another leg on your long haul flight. So long haul is more fatiguing from a body, like circadian rhythm point of view, especially if you are trying to readapt to the different time zones, which some people tend to do, especially young people tend to want to adapt to the time zone so that you can, if you're flying to Hawaii, you want to be up surfing during the day. And that the problem is that daytime in Hawaii is nighttime in Dubai or whatever you have your home base in. So you have to readapt, and when you do that, it's draining on the body. Okay, so young people tend to do this. People with family tend to want to stay on whatever time zone they are at home, so that when they get home to their kids and their families, they are not really, really fatigued, but they're in the same time zone, basically, if that makes sense. But once again, I haven't flown long haul myself, so this is hearsay for me. I do know that after a couple of years flying long haul, it does wear on you a little bit, unless you find a very proper technique to watch this, to keep your body clock in check. Because if you're constantly changing your body clock all the time, it will be wearing on you a little bit. It's kind of like working night shifts if you've done that. Which brings me to another thing, night flying. Now, in my company, I'm fortunate not to do much night flying. The only night sessions I do is when I'm instructing in the simulator. Night sessions have similar problems as with long-haul flights. It's you're working when the body is telling you that it should be sleeping. So it does wear you down a little bit. But once again, with 4 days of off days following a working period, it's ample time to rest, providing that you actually do rest during those days and not use it for something else. Okay, so that's how, at least in my airline, we deal with the issue of fatigue. We work no nights. We have a fixed roster pattern, which is clear. You have a planned roster for 4 weeks and you have a set roster for 1 week. So you know approximately what you're going to do in 4 weeks, but you know for certain what you're going to do. Well, certain, more or less. It can always be last time changes, but more or less certain what you're going to do the next week, because that roster is fixed. Okay. And then, you know, we work actively with discussing these things on recurrent training, making sure that people do watch what they're eating, make sure that people do exercise, you know, a little bit, at least being aware that it's available, and also to make sure that they have a good place to like sleep when we have, if we have overnights, for example, the overnight has to be in hotels, which can be black out the windows and reasonably low noise levels and things like that. So it's a combined effort by the pilots and the airline to make sure that you guys are always rested. Now, when it comes to flight time limitations, there are two different things that we have to separate. And flight time limitations is a little bit tricky to get your head around. So there you will be hearing about duty time and flight duty period. Those are two different things. Okay, they both start when you have to report for your duty. So different airlines have different report times. In my case, we start 45 minutes before our first flight of the day. So both the duty time and the flight duty period start at that point. Now, the flight duty period continues until you block on your last sector. There can also be split duty, wherein you have to stop and go to a hotel in the middle of the duty, but it's very, very rare that happens if you're working for a normal short to medium haul operator. But the flight duty period is that. It starts 45 minutes before and then it continues until you block on your last sector. The duty period starts 45 minutes before as well, but it continues until you are finished with the paperwork. Basically, we tend to have 30 minutes of post-flight duties as part of our duty time. Okay. Now, that doesn't sound like a big difference, okay? But the difference comes when you have to position, for example, to do something. So, flight duty period starts then at the same time. Let's say that, for an example, you have to fly from London to Barcelona. Okay, and then rostering tells you that you have to stay in Barcelona, and then you have to position back home on a flight that leaves 5 hours later. Okay, your flight duty period starts 45 minutes before that flight, and it ends when you block on in Barcelona. So that might be 2 hours and 45 minutes of flight duty period. Okay, that's your legal flight duty period. Your duty time stops when you have finished positioning back home to London, in this case. So if you have to sit and wait for 5 hours in Barcelona, and then you have to, position as a passive crew member back to London, it stops when you get home there. So even though you have a flight duty period of 2 hours and 45, your duty period might be 15 hours. Now, why is this important? It's because when you hear that we have a flight time limitation, that is regarding flight duty period. Duty time generally does not have any restriction when it comes to day to day. It has over a 28-day period you have duty time maximums, but over a 1 day or so you can go for almost as long as you can think of. However, your rest is based on your duty time. So even if you've had only a flight duty period of 2 hours and 45 and you've had a duty time of 13 hours, you're going to need 13 hours of rest, because your rest is based on your duty period and not your flight duty time. Sorry, your flight duty period. You see how this is can be a little bit confusing? Okay. So when it comes to our maximums, at the moment we have a flight duty period maximum of 13 hours. That flight duty period will then be reduced with 30 minutes for each sector after the second one. So if you're doing 4 sectors, then you have 30 plus 30 minutes of reduction, which means that you now can only operate for 12 hours. So that 12 hours tends to be, when you're doing a 4-sector day, tends to be the maximum. Okay. That can be extended in case of something happening. The captain, there's something called captain's discretion that the captain can use, providing that all crew members feel fit to fly. If, let's say, you have a technical malfunction that leaves you waiting on your 3rd sector for a couple of hours, and you see that you're going to go past 12 hours, then providing that the captain is happy, that the rest of the crew is not fatigued and everything, he or she can then extend with another 2 hours to recover the aircraft back to base. So that's what captain's discretion is about. But it has to be done providing that you have talked to everyone and everyone is happy about it. Okay. So then you have 12 to a maximum of 14. Or if you're doing 2 sectors, you have 13 plus 2, so maximum of 15, using the captain's discretion. Now, there are also other things involved in this. If you're flying within the window of circadian low, which is between 2 o'clock in the morning and 5:59 in the morning, that also has implications of your maximum flight duty period, but that's way too complicated to get into here. You just need to know that if you do fly during nighttime, you will be able to fly less. And you'll have to look up your own operations manual, flight time limitations, in order to see exactly how that works, because it becomes very complicated then. But as I said, that has to do with your flight duty period. It doesn't have anything to do with your duty time. So those are 2 separate things. We also then, this is on your daily basis, and it sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. So one day you might be flying a lot. If there's a lot of delays or whatever, there might be French ATC strikes, or there might be technical malfunctions that leaves you waiting for engineers and stuff. You can have really long days. However, when you do, you're generally not able to fly the day after, because the longer duty time you have, the longer rest you need, which means that if you're working 5 days and you end up landing at 3 o'clock in the morning and you need 14 hours of rest, you're not going to be able to operate the next day. So you'll be put on standby from when your rest stops, which can be only a couple of hours then. So you see, this is there to make sure that we don't get into a situation where you work a really long day and then you have a little bit of rest and then you have to work again. That doesn't happen. You need to get proper rest in between each flight, not each flight, but each duty period. And then we also have, on top of that, you have maximums every 28 days. So every rolling 28 days, we can have 100 hours of block time. And you have, I think it's 190 hours of duty time in every 28 days as well. And then on top of that, you have 900 hours every year. So maximum of 900 hours to fly every year. All of these combined means that the amount of time you can fly each month is fairly restricted, and it doesn't tend to be. You can have some summer months which are really, really intense, but then you'll have winter months which are much, much slower, generally. So that's it. I hope if you do have any questions about this, then please let me know. These are the kind of questions that I've been getting from you guys, and if you have anything regarding this, then just send me a message on my YouTube channel, or send me a suggestion about what you do want me to talk about. So this is flight time limitations and managing your fatigue, and you might want me to talk about something else, more technical or something like that. Just let me know, and I'll do my best to fulfill your wishes. Okay. For now, remember, subscribe, and also remember to tell people, if you do like this podcast, tell other people about it. Send it out on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever you feel like, and talk about it on forums, things like that, if you think it's helpful, and we'll start gaining some momentum. So for now, I am going to go out and enjoy my vacation, and I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.